The arena of the Valen Ascendancy had been built to make small things feel their smallness. Its floor was a single disk of black glass, polished until it drank the light of 10,000 hovering lamps, and around it rose tier upon tier of stone seating carved in the shape of folded wings. When the tiers were full, as they were now, the whole structure resembled some vast predatory bird crouched over its prey, and the prey, a single human figure kneeling at the center of the black glass, looked no larger than a seed dropped into the throat of the world. Her name was Wren Callahan, and she was 22 years old. She knelt because the manacles at her wrists were bolted to a ring in the floor, and the chain had been measured so that a person could kneel or lie but never stand. She had been in that posture for 11 hours. Her knees had gone past pain into a kind of ringing numbness, and her hands, cuffed behind her, had swollen against the metal until they no longer felt like hands at all. Her flight suit was scorched along the left side where the fire had reached her before the bulkhead sealed. Her dark hair was matted to her scalp with dried blood from a cut above her ear. She did not look, to the assembled nobility of the Ascendancy, like anyone who had ever mattered. That was the point of the arena. High above her, on a balcony of white bonestone that jutted from the eastern tier like the prow of a ship, stood the one for whom the whole apparatus of the moment existed. Princess Ithran Sel Valen, third daughter of the Radiant Throne, warden of the Outer Reach, stood at the balcony's edge with her long hands folded on the rail. She was tall in the way of her people, nearly 2.5 meters, her skin the pale silver gray of moonlit ash, her eyes a deep and lightless amber that did not blink so much as slowly close and open, like something considering. A crest of fine feathered filaments ran from her brow back over her skull and down her spine, and when she was angry those filaments rose. They were raised now. She wore the gray of mourning over the white of command, and the combination was itself a sentence. I have lost something, and someone will pay. The someone was the small human seed on the glass. Ithran lifted one hand, and the murmur of 10,000 voices died as though a valve had been closed. In the silence, the princess's voice carried without any apparent effort, because the arena had been shaped to carry it. 11 days ago, she said, the flagship of my house, the unbroken Meridian, died in the dark above Calyx Station. 940 of my people died with it. Among them was my sister, the Lady Sarach, who was aboard to bless the new engines. She was younger than I am. She had never in her life carried a weapon. The princess let the number hang. 940. In the tiers, some of the nobles bowed their heads, and the gesture rippled outward the way wind moves through grain. We recovered one survivor from the wreck, Ithran went on. One. We pulled her from a sealed maintenance bay in the drive section, alive, breathing, unhurt, but for burns she gave herself. A human, a creature of a species we admitted to the trade lanes out of pity, because they came to us starving and clever, and we thought that cleverness with no claws was a thing that could be trusted. Her amber eyes found Wren's, and did not leave them. The drive core of the unbroken Meridian did not fail, the princess said. It was made to fail. Someone walked into the most protected chamber on the most protected vessel in my fleet, and with their own 2 hands unlocked the containment lattice and let the fire out. Someone who knew exactly which seals to break and in which order. Someone who was found afterward in the one place aboard that ship where a person might survive the death of everyone else. She paused. We found her there. We found her tools. We found her handprints, human handprints, 5-fingered on the lattice housing. There is no other survivor to accuse. There is no other explanation to weigh. The court of my house has heard the evidence and reached the only verdict the evidence allows. She lifted a data slate from the rail and read from it, though everyone present knew she had no need to read. Wren Callahan of the Human Freeholds, for the murder of 940 subjects of the Radiant Throne, for the murder of the Lady Sarach Sel Valen, for an act of war committed under the cover of peace. This court finds you guilty, and this court sentences you to death." The word landed and did not echo. The arena had been shaped to swallow it whole and leave only its weight. Wren Callahan lifted her head. It took her a long time, because her neck had stiffened, and because 11 hours of kneeling teaches the body to keep still. But she lifted it, and she looked up the long white span of the bone-stone balcony to the tall gray figure at its top, and the assembled ascendancy waited to see her weep, or beg, or scream, because that was what the arena was for. It was for the moment when the small thing understood its smallness and broke. She did not break. She looked at the princess with an expression that was almost unbearable to the nobles who were near enough to read it, because it was not fear and it was not defiance. It was pity. The human was looking at the princess the way one looks at a person walking cheerfully toward a cliff they cannot see. "You have that wrong," Wren said. Her voice was a ruin cracked from smoke, but it carried, because she had learned in 11 hours exactly how quiet the arena could be. Almost all of it, and the part you have wrong is going to cost you more than the part you have right. A hiss ran through the lower tiers. To speak so to the warden of the outer reach in the shadow of her own sister's death was not courage, it was obscenity. Ithran's filaments rose another degree. But she did not order the woman silenced. That later, the historians would note, was the first hinge on which everything turned, that the princess, who had every right to close the human's mouth forever, chose instead to let it stay open one moment more. "You will not talk your way off that glass," the princess said. "No," Wren agreed. "I don't expect to. I stopped expecting to somewhere around hour 6. She shifted her weight and the chain rang. "I'm not talking to save my life, princess. I gave up on my life 11 days ago in the drive section when I did the thing you're going to kill me for. I'm talking because you're about to make a mistake so large it will outlive both of us, and I would rather not die knowing I let you make it without one word said." "Then say your word." Ithran's voice had gone flat and cold as the floor. "You have earned a last word. I am not a barbarian. Say it and be done." And here the princess made her second choice, the one that turned the first hinge into a door. She lifted her hand again, and a chronometer bloomed to life in the air above the arena floor, a great ring of pale fire, marked in the 60 divisions of a standard minute, a thing used in the old rites to time a condemned soul's final prayer. "You have 1 minute," the princess said. 1 minute, human, and then the floor opens, and the dark takes you the way it took my sister. Use it however you please. Weep, curse me, pray to whatever your kind prays to, but when the ring closes, so does the account between us." The ring of fire began to burn down. 60. 59. 58. Wren Callahan closed her eyes for exactly one of those seconds, and in the privacy of that single blink she did something no one in the arena could see. She remembered the drive section. Not the fire, she had stopped letting herself remember the fire, but the 30 seconds before it, when she had stood in the most protected chamber on the most protected ship in the fleet with her hand on the containment lattice and understood, all at once and far too late, what she was looking at. Then she opened her eyes, and she began to spend her minute. "My name is Wren Callahan," she said, "and I'm a drive technician, 3rd class, contracted to your house through the Human Freehold Labor Accords. I am not a soldier. I have never been a soldier. 11 days ago I was aboard the Unbroken Meridian because your quartermaster's office assigned me there, to help calibrate the new containment lattice your engineers had installed, because the humans who built the lattice's control software were cheaper than the ones who could have done it in-house." She drew a breath that scraped. "You put me on that ship, princess. Your own house put me 12 decks from your sister. Remember that in a minute when you understand the rest." 50. On the day it happened, I was running a diagnostic pass on the lattice. Routine. The kind of thing I'd done 100 times, and the numbers were wrong. Her cracked voice found, somewhere, a thread of the person she had been before the arena, precise, quick, a little impatient, the voice of someone who was good at a difficult thing and knew it. The containment field on a drive core of that class holds a plasma the temperature of a small sun's edge. It's held by a lattice of 9 nested shells, and each shell is tuned to a frequency, and the frequencies have to stay in a very particular relationship or the whole thing sings itself apart. That's the word we use, singing. When a lattice starts to fail, the shells drift toward the same frequency, and they resonate and the resonance grows, and then the field collapses inward and the little sun comes out. She looked up at the princess. Your lattice was singing, princess. Not from an accident. Someone had reached into the tuning array, the array behind 3 coded seals that only a flag officer can open, and shifted the shells, 1 degree at a time, over what the logs told me was 6 days. Slow enough that the automatic systems read each step as normal drift and corrected around it. Fast enough that on the day I found it, the field had maybe 40 minutes left before it collapsed. 40 minutes and 940 people, and your sister, gone in a light no one would even see from outside because it would happen inside the hull. 40. The princess had gone very still. The filaments along her spine had not lowered, but they had stopped rising. I am a technician, 3rd class, Wren said. I am not authorized to touch a flag officer's tuning array. I am not authorized to declare an emergency. The protocol, your protocol, the one printed in the manual your engineers handed me on my first day, says that a fault in the containment lattice must be reported up the chain, to the drive master, then to the ship's second, then to the captain, then a board convenes, and they decide. That protocol assumes the fault is an accident. That protocol takes, on a good day, 90 minutes. Her mouth twisted. I had 40, and I understood, standing there with the numbers in front of me, that whoever had reached into that array had reached into it knowing about the protocol, had counted on it, had built the whole thing to run out the clock inside the rules, so that everyone would follow the manual right up until the moment the little sun came out, and no one would ever be blamed because everyone would be dead. 30. So I broke the rules, Wren said simply. I did the only thing a technician can do to a lattice that's 40 minutes from singing itself into a star. I couldn't retune it in time. Retuning 9 shells by hand takes hours and I had minutes. I couldn't report it in time, so I killed it. I unlocked the containment lattice on purpose, in the right order, the order that dumps the plasma into the drive bell instead of into the ship. I vented the core. I blew the engines and I killed the drive, and I turned the most powerful vessel in your fleet into a dead hulk drifting over Calyx Station. Her voice did not rise, but it hardened into something that the nearest nobles would remember for the rest of their lives. 940 people died, princess. They died when the venting went wrong, because a 3rd-class technician doing a 2-officer job with 40 minutes and no help does not get everything right. I will carry those 940 for however long you leave me alive, which is now about 25 seconds. But hear the thing you have wrong. If I had done nothing, if I had followed your protocol, if I had reported it up your beautiful chain and waited for your board to convene, every one of those people would still be dead, and so would every soul on Calyx Station beneath them, and the fire would have been so complete that you would never have known it was murder. You would have called it an engine fault and mourned and moved on, and the person who reached into that array would have watched you do it. 20. For the first time, Princess Ithron spoke into the human's minute. She had not meant to. The words came out of her before her judgment could stop them, because they were the only words that mattered. Who, she said. Who reached into the array? Wren Callahan smiled then, a terrible, tired human smile, the smile of someone who has been waiting 11 hours to be asked exactly that. That, she said, is the part I've been staying alive for. 15. Behind 3 coded seals, Wren said, fast now, the words tumbling because there were so few seconds left to hold them. Seals that only a flag officer can open. There were 4 flag officers aboard the unbroken Meridian. 3 of them died on the bridge when I vented the core, and I have their command logs because I pulled the black slate from the drive section before your people pulled me out, and it's still there, sewn into the lining of the left boot your torturers didn't think to check because they were so certain they already knew everything. She was breathing hard. 3 flag officers died. The 4th left the ship 4 hours before I found the fault. Left it on a courier skiff, logged as a supply run at a time when there were no supplies to run. The 4th flag officer is standing on your balcony, Princess, 2 steps to your left, in the gray of morning. And if you open the ring and let the floor take me now, the only copy of the log that proves it goes into the dark with me, and he wins, and you will spend the rest of your reign thanking the man who murdered your sister. 10. The arena did not breathe. And Princess Ithran Sel Valen, warden of the Outer Reach, did the thing that would make the historians argue for 100 years about what kind of ruler she truly was. She did not look at the man 2 steps to her left. She kept her lightless amber eyes fixed on the small, burned human on the black glass, and in a voice that had gone quiet enough that only the ring of fire could hear it, she said one word. Stop. 9. The ring of fire stopped burning down. The ring of fire hung frozen at 9 seconds, its light painting the black glass in a slow red pulse, and for the length of 3 heartbeats the great arena of the Valen Ascendancy held perfectly still. 10,000 nobles who had come to watch a small thing die now found themselves watching something they had no right for. There was no ceremony for a stopped execution. There was no protocol for a princess who looked at a condemned murderer and said stop. Wren Callahan did not move on the glass. She had learned in 11 hours that stillness was the only power a chained thing had, and she held it now the way a diver holds the last of her air. She had spent everything. The log was named. The man was named. Whatever happened next was no longer in her hands, and she found with a strange, floating clarity that she was almost glad of it. For 11 days she had carried this alone, sewn into the lining of her boot and the meat of her memory, and to have finally set it down in the open air felt like the release of a held breath, even if the next breath was her last. 2 steps to the princess's left, in the gray of morning, a man of the ascendancy went very carefully still in a way that was different from everyone else's stillness. His name was Kaloth Sel Valen, and he was the princess's uncle, the brother of the dead king who had fathered her, a flag officer of the radiant throne with 3 centuries of service woven into the braid of filaments down his back. He was old for one of his kind, and he wore his age like armor, the gray of his crest, the deliberate slowness of his movements, the reputation of a man who had buried 3 sovereigns and served them all without a single stain. When the human's words had named him, he had not flinched. That was the discipline of 3 centuries. But he had gone still, and the stillness of a man who has nothing to fear is not the same as the stillness of a man who is deciding whether to run, and there were those in the tiers close enough to see the difference. The princess had not looked at him. She had kept her eyes on Wren, but now slowly, into the frozen silence, she turned her head, and she regarded her uncle with the amber eyes that did not blink so much as consider. "Uncle," she said. Her voice was mild. It was the mildness that frightened the courtiers most because they had heard it before and they knew what it preceded. "The human says you left the unbroken meridian 4 hours before the drive core was found to be singing, on a courier skiff, logged as a supply run." A pause. "I remember that you were not aboard when the ship died. I remember I was grateful. I remember thinking the throne could not afford to lose you and Sarech in the same hour." Another pause, longer. "Tell me it was a supply run, uncle, and I will open the ring, and this human will die for the lie she has told, and we will speak no more of it." It was, everyone understood, an offer. It was also a test, and Kaloth Sel Valen was old enough and clever enough to know it for both. He had one path to safety, and it was narrow, and it required that he be, in this moment, exactly the man the whole court believed him to be, the loyal uncle, insulted by a murderer's slander, secure in 3 centuries of trust. He took the narrow path. He almost took it well. It was a supply run, he said, and his voice was deep and calm and carried the weight of his age. Medical isotopes for the garrison at Threshold. The manifest is in the quartermaster's ledger, niece, as it has been these 11 days, and any clerk can read it to you. That this creature has learned my name, and my movements tells me only that she prepared her slander with care, as murderers of her cunning do. She has had 11 days in a cell to learn who was aboard and who was not, and to build from it a story clever enough to buy herself a few more breaths. I am grieved, Ithron, I am grieved past speaking, that you would let her spend those breaths inventing a traitor out of your own blood. He drew himself up, and the gray filaments along his spine lifted in the display of wounded honor that his people use the way humans use a raised voice. Open the ring. Do not let my sister's daughter dishonor her sister's death by listening one moment more to the thing that killed her. It was well done. 3 centuries had taught him how to do it well. And it would have worked. The historians agreed on this later. In every account, it would have worked, because the story he told was the story everyone in the arena already believed, and a story that agrees with what people already believe requires almost no evidence to be accepted. He needed only for the princess to want to believe him, and she had every reason to. He offered her the gift of a world in which her uncle was loyal, and her sister's murderer was a clever human liar, and that world was so much kinder than the alternative that the wanting of it should have been enough. But Wren Callahan had spent 11 days thinking about exactly this moment, and she had not spent her minute carelessly. She had named the log, she had named the skiff, she had named the man. And she had done it in that order for a reason, because she was a technician, and technicians understand that the strength of a claim is not in the claim, but in what the claim forces the other side to do. Ask him, Wren said from the glass, quiet, not moving, why the skiff burned its main drive on the way out. Kaloth did not answer. It was not his to answer. The princess had not asked. But the human's words had done their work, and Ithron's amber eyes narrowed a fraction, and she said, explain. A supply run to Threshold, Wren said, is a short hop. Sublight, low burn, you sip fuel because you're not in a hurry, the garrison isn't going anywhere. The flight plan for a supply run to Threshold is a matter of record, and it calls for a low-burn transit that takes about 9 hours and uses maybe 1/10 of a courier skiff's fuel. She lifted her head a little more, and her ruined voice found its precision again, the voice of a woman reciting numbers she had checked and checked and checked. But the drive section logs the wake signature of every vessel that leaves the Meridian's berth, because the wake affects the containment field and we log everything that affects the field. It's in the black slate, in my boot, and the skiff that left 4 hours before I found the fault did not leave on a low burn. It left on a full burn. Maximum thrust, fuel to the redline, the profile of a vessel that wanted to be very far away very fast. She let that sit. You don't burn to the redline to deliver medical isotopes, princess. You burn to the red line when you know something is about to happen behind you, and you want to be outside the blast radius when it does. The silence in the arena changed its quality. It had been the silence of people watching. Now it was the silence of people beginning to calculate. The manifest can be forged, Wren went on, relentless now, because she understood that the moment belonged to her only as long as she filled it. The ledger can be edited. A flag officer with 3 coded seals can make the quartermaster's book say anything he likes, and I'd never be able to prove it, because I'm a third-class technician and he's your uncle and the book is his word against mine. He knows that. He counted on that. But he could not edit the wake signature, princess, because the wake signature isn't in the quartermaster's book. It's in the drive section black slate, logged automatically by a system he didn't know was watching, because nobody watches the drive logs except drive technicians, and he didn't think there'd be a drive technician left alive to read them. Her mouth twisted again into that terrible, tired smile. That's the thing about murdering a whole ship to hide a crime. It works right up. until one of the people you meant to murder doesn't die. 2 steps to the princess's left, Vailin made a small motion. It was the smallest of motions, a shift of weight, a turn toward the archway at the balcony's rear, the beginning of the first step a man takes when he has decided at some level below thought that the room he is in has become a trap. And it was that motion, more than any word the human had spoken, that undid him. Because 3 centuries of discipline can hold a face still and keep a voice calm, but the body knows the truth before the mind admits it, and every noble on the eastern tier saw the old flag officer's body decide to leave the room a full second before his reason caught up and froze him back into stillness. Princess Ithran saw it too. "Guards," she said, and her voice had lost all its mildness. "The archways, all of them. No one on this balcony leaves." The winged shapes of the household guard moved to seal the exits, and Vailin stood in the gray of morning with 3 centuries of trust dissolving around him like frost in the sun. And he understood, the historians were certain he understood, in that moment, that the narrow path had closed. He had counted on the human dying with the log in her boot. He had counted on the arena doing what arenas do, on the smallness of the small thing, on the princess's grief making her want the kinder world. He had built a perfect crime around the certainty that no one would be left to read the drive logs, and the single flaw in it was kneeling on the black glass, 22 years old, burned and chained and entirely, impossibly, alive. "Niece," he said, and now the deep calm voice had a thread in it that had not been there before, a thread of the thing he had spent his life not showing. "You will take the word of a human murderer over the blood of your own house. You will let this creature, this clever, cornered animal, set you against your own uncle in front of the whole ascendancy, on the strength of a story about wake signatures that not one soul in this arena but her can read. Where is this black slate? In her boot, she says." Sewn into her boot, how convenient. How very convenient that the only proof is a thing she carries, a thing she can shape and edit as easily as she accuses me of shaping the ledger. He turned to the tiers, spreading his long hands, appealing to the 10,000. She has had 11 days. 11 days to build a slate that says whatever she needs it to say. You would hang 3 centuries of my service on the word of a device in a murderer's boot. It was, again, well done. And again it might have worked, because he had found the one true weakness in the human's position. The proof was in her possession, and a proof in the possession of the accused is always suspect. The tears, which had begun to turn against him, wavered. A murmur ran through them, the sound of 10,000 minds each reaching for the story that let them keep the world they knew. The princess looked at Wren. "He is right about one thing," Ithran said, and her voice was cold and level. "The slate is in your keeping. You could have made it say anything. Give me one reason to believe the log in your boot over 3 centuries of my uncle's service." And Wren Callahan, who had spent 11 days thinking about exactly this, gave her the reason she had been saving for last. "Because I never touched the drive logs," Wren said. "I couldn't. The black slate seals itself the instant the drive core vents. It's a safety feature. It locks the last state of every system at the moment of catastrophic failure, so the accident board can reconstruct what happened. The instant I blew the core, the slate froze, and it froze with a cryptographic seal that your own house designed, keyed to the ship's identity, unforgeable and uneditable by anyone below flag rank." She looked up at Kaloth, and there was no pity left in her face now, only the hard, bright thing that had kept her alive for 11 days. "I can't edit it, Princess. He can. He's the only man in this arena with the rank to break that seal and rewrite what's inside it, and he had 11 days to try, except he couldn't because he didn't have the slate. I did, in my boot. Which means the log in there is exactly what the ship recorded in the last second of its life, sealed by your house's own hand, and the only person it could possibly incriminate is the one man standing on your balcony who keeps insisting it can't be trusted." She let the silence stretch one beat. "Break the seal, Princess. You have the authority. Break it in front of the whole ascendancy and read what the ship wrote as it died." If I forged it, the seal will show tampering, and I'll go into the dark with your blessing. If I didn't." She did not finish. She did not have to. Every soul in the arena had already finished it for her. Princess Ithran Sel Valen stood at the rail of white bone stone, and she looked for a long moment at the small, burned human on the black glass, and then she turned and looked at her uncle, whose face had at last, after 3 centuries, begun to come apart. And she made her third choice. "Bring me the slate," she said. A steward descended to the arena floor. He was a young Valen in the plain white of household service, and he crossed the black glass toward the chained human with the wide-eyed care of a person who has been told to approach something dangerous and is not sure whether the danger is the prisoner or the moment. Wren did not move. She turned as much as the chain allowed and lifted her left foot toward him and said, in the flat instructional voice of a technician talking someone through a procedure, "The lining, along the outer seam. There's a slit. Don't pull, cut it, you'll tear the contacts if you pull." The steward cut it. From the lining of the scorched boot, he drew a slate no larger than a hand, black, edged in the pale blue of a sealed device, its surface alive with the faint crawling light of a cryptographic lock still holding. He carried it up the long white span of the balcony as though it were a live coal, and he laid it in the princess's hands, and he retreated. Ithran held it. For a moment she only looked at it, this small black thing that had been sewn against a human skin for 11 days, and the whole arena watched her hold it, and no one breathed. She was, in that moment, poised on a threshold she could still refuse to cross. She could open the ring and let the floor take the human and never break the seal, and choose the kinder world, the world where her uncle was loyal and her grief was clean. Kaloth was watching her with the same understanding. He had one hope left, and it was that she would not want to know. "You do not have to do this," Kaloth said, very quietly, so quietly that it was almost tender, the voice of an uncle to a niece he had held as a hatchling. "Ithran, Sarech is gone. Nothing in that slate brings her back. You can let it end here. You can let the human die and let your sister rest and let me stand beside you as I always have. Break that seal in front of the ascendancy and whatever it says, true or false, you tear our house open in the sight of 10,000 mouths that will carry it to 10,000 more. Is that what Sarech would want? Her death made into a spectacle, her house made into a scandal. Put it down, niece. Put it down and let us grieve as a family, in private, and never speak of wake signatures again." It was the most dangerous thing he had said, because it was the first thing he had said that was partly true. Breaking the seal would tear the house open. The scandal would be real. And the princess loved her house, and she was tired, and the grief in her was a physical weight that the whole arena could see in the set of her shoulders. For a long moment she stood with the slate in her hands and her uncle's voice in her ear, and the historians would argue forever about what moved through her in that silence. What she said when she finally spoke, she said to Wren. "Human," said Princess Ithran, "why did you keep it?" Wren looked up. "Princess." The slate, the amber eyes were fixed on her. "You knew what it was. You knew that as long as you carried it, my people would think you the murderer, and you knew that if you simply let it be found, it would be taken from you and given to a flag officer to read, and the only flag officer of my house within reach was standing on this balcony. You knew that revealing it too early meant handing it to the very man it condemns. So you hid it, against your skin. For 11 days, through interrogation, through the arena, through 11 hours on that glass. You could have surrendered it on the first day and bought yourself easier treatment. You could have used it to bargain. Instead, you kept it hidden and you let them chain you and you waited." She tilted her head, and the gesture had something in it that was almost wonder. "You waited for the one moment when I would have no choice but to break the seal myself in front of witnesses where he could not take it and where I could not look away. You did not spend 11 days trying to save your life. You spent 11 days building a trap that only closes if I choose to spring it." A pause. "Why? You are going to die either way, by your own account. Why build so carefully a justice you will not live to see?" And Wren Callahan, 22 years old, burned and chained on the black glass under the frozen ring of fire, gave the answer that the historians would carve, 3 years later, into the base of the statue they raised in the arena where the black glass used to be. "Because 940 people died with my hands on the lattice," she said. "I don't get to keep my life after that. I made my peace with that in the drive section in the last 30 seconds when I understood what I was going to have to do. But the man who made me do it, the man who tuned that core to sing and got on his skiff and burned to the redline and left 940 of your people in my hands to take the blame, he doesn't get to keep his life either. I couldn't save the ship, Princess. I could only choose how it died. But I could make sure that whatever the fire took, it didn't take the truth with it. That's the only thing left that I could still do right. So I did it right. I don't need to live to see it. I just needed you to see it. And you're seeing it now." Princess Ithran Sel Valen looked at the human for the length of a long breath. Then she raised the slate, and she pressed her palm to its surface, and in a clear voice that carried to the highest tier, she spoke the words of her house's authority. The words that only the blood of the radiant throne could speak, that told the seal it was answering to the ones it had been made to answer to. The pale blue light of the lock uncoiled. The slate woke, and the last second of the unbroken meridian's life poured out into the air of the arena, projected in light above the black glass for 10,000 witnesses to see. There was the drive section, rendered in the cold, precise lines of a system diagram. There was the containment lattice, its 9 nested shells drifting toward one frequency, the resonance climbing in a red that pulsed faster and faster. There were the tuning commands time-stamped, each one logged with the coded seal of the flag officer who had entered it. 6 days of them, 1 degree at a time, each stamped with an identity the whole arena could read. There was the courier skiff's departure, its wake signature blazing at full burn, 4 hours before the end. And there, in the final frozen second, was the record of a single pair of human hands unlocking the containment lattice in the exact order that vented the plasma outward into the dark instead of inward into the ship. A technician doing, alone and too late and with everything to lose, the only thing that could still be done. The seal on every tuning command bore the same name. Kaloth Selvalin. The arena made a sound then that it had never been built to make. Not a cheer, not a cry, but a vast low exhalation, the sound of 10,000 certainties collapsing at once, the sound of a whole assembly of nobles feeling the world they had walked in an hour ago slide out from under them, and a new and terrible world take its place. The human had not murdered the ship. The human had tried to save it. The murderer was the uncle. The murderer was the blood of the throne. The murderer had been standing on the balcony in the gray of morning the entire time, wearing his grief like the rest of them, 2 steps from the princess he had made an orphan of a sister. And Kaloth Selvalin, seeing 3 centuries end in the light above the black glass, did the thing that cornered old power always does when the narrow path finally closes for good. He stopped pretending. The change in him was visible from the highest tier, the shoulders dropping their false grief, the gray filaments flattening not in wounded honor now, but in something colder and older, the face of the loyal uncle sloughing away to show the face beneath it, the one that had tuned a star to kill 940 of his own people, and slept, presumably, without difficulty. When he spoke, the deep calm was still there, but it had turned to iron, and every ear in the arena understood that they were hearing, for the first time, the true voice of the man. "You were always the sentimental one," Kaloth said to the princess, and he was not appealing to the tears any more. "You and Sarech both, your father's daughters, full of feeling and empty of nerve. Do you imagine I did this for pleasure? The throne is dying, niece. It has been dying for a century, and your father coddled it, and your sister would have coddled it, and you will coddle it. And one day the reach will fall to the cluster fleets because the blood of the radiant throne cannot make a hard choice to save its own life." His voice rose, and it filled the arena the way the princesses had, because he too had been born to be heard in this place. Sarech was going to bless the new engines and take command of the outer squadrons. A child, a soft-handed child at the head of my fleet. I did what your father would not do and what you will never do. I removed her. And I would have removed you, and I would have taken the reach and hardened it and held it. And in 100 years, when the cluster came, your soft-handed grandchildren would have lived because a hard man once did a necessary thing. That is not murder, niece. That is governance. The only thing I did wrong. And here his amber eyes went to the small human on the glass. And there was, at last, real feeling in them, the pure cold hatred of a mastermind for the one variable he did not account for. The only thing I did wrong was leave a technician alive to read a log I did not know was being written. He was still speaking when he moved. 3 centuries of a flag officer's training do not leave a body, and Kaloth Sel Valen was old, but he was not slow, and he had understood some seconds ago that he would not leave this arena free. So he had made the last calculation of a cornered man, and it was the calculation that such men always make. If I cannot have the outcome I built, I will at least deny it to the ones who took it from me. His long hand went to the ceremonial blade at his belt, a flag officer's dress blade, worn as ornament, honed as habit, and he did not go for the guards, and he did not go for himself. He went for the princess. He was 2 steps away. 2 steps, and a blade already clearing its sheath, and the household guard still moving toward the archways they had been sent to seal. Too far, all of them too far, and Princess Ithran Sel Valen with a slate in her hands and no weapon and no time. The whole arena saw it happen, and the whole arena was too slow. 10,000 witnesses, and not one of them close enough to matter. And the uncle's blade came up and around in the short, brutal arc of a killing stroke 3 centuries in the practicing. And a voice from the black glass, the ruined, cracked, entirely human voice, cut across the arena at the top of its lungs, and it did not scream and it did not beg. It gave an instruction. The crest grabbed the crest. It blinds them. Wren Callahan could not reach the princess. She was chained to the floor 40 feet below. But she had spent 11 days among the Valen, watching them, being interrogated by them, and a technician's mind takes things apart and remembers how they work. And she had noticed the thing that the Valen themselves had stopped noticing about their own bodies 1,000 years ago. That the feathered filaments of the crest, the fine sensory array that ran from brow to spine, was how they saw the world in the half-second of a fast movement. Their eyes were slow. They blinked by closing and opening, and in a sudden violent motion they steered by the crest, and a hand closed hard on the crest at the base of the skull flooded the whole sensory array with noise and blinded them as surely as a palm across human eyes. She could not reach the princess, but the princess could hear. Afterward, when the poets of the ascendancy tried to make the next half-second into something grand, they always failed, because there was nothing grand in it. There was only a princess who heard an instruction shouted by a chained human she had condemned to death, and who, in the sliver of time she had, with a blade already falling toward her throat, chose to trust it. That was the whole of it. She trusted the human. Princess Ithran did not step back, because there was no time to step back. She did not raise the slate to block, because a slate does not stop a flag officer's blade. She dropped the slate, and she drove her long gray hand up and forward, not toward the knife but toward her uncle's head, and her fingers closed on the base of his crest where it met his skull, and she gripped it and twisted the way one twists to tear something free. The effect was immediate and total. Kaloth Sel Valen's killing stroke, 3 centuries in the practicing, went wide by the width of a hand. He had steered it by the crest, as his kind steered every fast and violent motion, guiding the blade through a body sense older than sight, and the crest had gone to white noise, a scream of static flooding the array, and for the length of a heartbeat the old flag officer was as blind and unstrung as a hatchling. The blade passed the princess's shoulder and scored a long, shallow line across the white bone stone of the rail and struck sparks, and did not find her throat. And Ithran, who had never in her sheltered life struck a living thing, held on to the crest with all the strength of her grief and her fear and her fury, and she bore her uncle down to the floor of the balcony by the only handhold that a Valen body could not defend. The household guard reached them then. It was over in another moment. The blade struck from his hand, the old officer pinned under the weight of 4 guards, the princess dragged back from him by an aide who did not dare touch her crest, and so wrapped both arms around her waist and hauled. But the moment that mattered had already passed, and everyone in the arena knew which moment it had been. It had not been the guards. It had been the princess's hand on the crest, and the crest had been Wren's, given from 40 feet away and 11 days of watching, the last gift of a technician who took things apart and remembered how they worked. Calathsel Valen did not fight the guards. Once his blade was gone and his crest released, the fight went out of him all at once, the way it does out of very old and very proud things when the last calculation has finally failed. He lay on the bonestone with 4 guards on him and turned his amber eyes toward the ceiling and said to no one, in the deep calm voice that had lied to a whole empire for 11 days, "You will regret keeping her alive. Softness always regrets its softness, but not for 100 years, so I will not be there to say I told you." Then he closed his eyes in the slow, considering way of his kind, and he said nothing more, and the guards took him from the arena through the archway he had tried, too late, to reach. Princess Ithransel Valen stood at the rail of white bonestone with her uncle's failed murder still ringing in her hands, and she looked down the long span at the small, burned human on the black glass, and for a moment the whole vast arena was silent again, but it was a different silence now. It was the silence of 10,000 people who had come to watch a thing die, and were now trying to understand that the thing had, without moving from the spot where it knelt in chains, reached up 40 feet and saved the life of the one who condemned it. The princess crossed to the head of the balcony stair. She did not summon a steward. She descended herself, alone, down the long white curve of the steps to the arena floor, and she crossed the black glass, the same glass she had made to make small things feel their smallness, and she walked to where Wren Callahan knelt chained to the ring in the center of it, and she knelt down. A princess of the radiant throne knelt on the black glass of her own arena, in front of 10,000 nobles, so that her eyes were level with the eyes of a human drive technician, 3rd class, whom she had ordered to die. Up close, Wren saw, the princess's amber eyes were not lightless at all. There was a great deal in them. Most of it was the thing that has no clean name, the thing a person feels when they have almost done something they could never have undone. "I was going to kill you," Ithran said. She said it quietly, only for the human, though the arena was shaped to carry it and carried it anyway. "In 1 minute. I had the ring lit. I had the floor ready. I was so certain, human. I had the evidence and the verdict and the grief, and I was so certain, and every certain thing I held was a thing my uncle built for me to hold. He killed 940 of my people, and he killed my sister, and then he handed me the perfect grief and the perfect murderer, and he stood beside me while I nearly did the last piece of his work for him. I nearly killed the one soul in my whole empire who tried to save the ship. If you had died on this glass, he would have won everything, and I would have thanked him at the funeral." Her voice did not break, but it thinned. "You knew that. You knew it 11 days ago in the drive section, and you built a way to stop it that cost you your life and required my hand to spring, because there was no other way to be sure the truth outlived the fire. Do you understand what you have done? Do you understand what you are?" Wren Callahan looked at the princess kneeling in front of her, and she was so tired, and the fear and the fire and the 11 days were all catching up to her at once now, that the thing they had been holding up was finally set down. "I understand that 940 people are dead with my hands on the lattice," she said. "That's what I am, princess. The rest is just what I did about it." "No," said Ithransel Valen. "No, listen to me, because I am going to say it once in front of the whole ascendancy so that it can never be unsaid." She raised her voice then and let the arena carry it, and she spoke not to the human alone but to the 10,000 and through them, to the history that would remember this. 940 of my people died because Kaloth Selvalan tuned a star to kill them and my sister with them. Every one of those deaths is his. Not one is yours. You were given 40 minutes to undo 6 days of murder, alone, with no rank and no help and no hope, and you spent every one of those minutes and then 11 days after them making certain that the truth of it would reach me even though you were sure it would cost you your life. My people call that heroism when it is done by one of us. I will not call it less because it was done by a human. She reached out, and with her own long gray hands she took hold of the manacles at Wren's wrists. You have knelt on my glass long enough. The manacles were keyed to a flag officer's authority, the same authority Kaloth had used to seal a star. But a princess of the radiant throne outranks a flag officer, and the locks knew her blood, and they opened at her touch. The chain fell away. Wren's swollen hands came free, and the blood rushed back into them in a wave of pins and fire, and she made a small sound, the first sound of simple pain she had let herself make in 11 days, and the princess caught her by the shoulders before she could fold forward onto the glass. Up, Ithran said, softly now holding her. Up. You do not kneel in this arena again. She rose, and she brought the human up with her, and she held her steady on the black glass while the feeling came screaming back into Wren's hands and knees, and 10,000 nobles of the Valan ascendancy watched their princess hold a human upright in the center of the arena where an hour ago she had condemned her, and the low, vast exhalation ran through the tears again, and this time, at its edges, it began to turn into something else. It began, here and there, hesitant and then less hesitant, to turn into the sound the Valan made when they had witnessed something that would outlast them. It was not applause. Their kind did not applaud. It was a low, sustained note, hummed from 10,000 throats at once, rising through the folded-wing tears, the sound they made only at the passing of the great and the crowning of the worthy. The note that the arena, for all its centuries, had never once been made to hold for anything that was not born of the radiant throne. They were humming it for a human. Wren Callahan stood in the center of it, held up by a princess, and did not understand at first what the sound was, and when the princess told her, leaning close, saying the name of the note in her ear, the human's face did a complicated thing, and she looked out at the humming tears, and at the frozen ring of fire still hanging in the air with its 9 seconds unspent, and she said, hoarse, half to herself, I really thought I was going to die on this floor. So did I, said Princess Ithran. So did everyone here, that is why they are singing. She looked at the ring of pale fire, the execution clock she had lit with her own hand, still hanging at 9 seconds. She lifted her hand toward it. Shall I close it? It is yours to close now. You bought back every second of it. Wren looked at the ring for a long moment. 9 seconds, the distance between a floor that opened and a life that didn't end. Leave it, she said. Leave it lit. Let it burn down on its own and gutter out. I want to watch it get to 0 and not mean anything. I've been watching it mean everything for an hour. A ghost of the technician's dry humor crossed her ruined face. Besides, somebody should have to explain to the record keepers why the execution ring in the great arena has a 9-second scorch mark that never finished. Let it be a footnote. Let it be the smallest possible monument to the largest mistake this house almost made. And Princess Ithran Selvalan, third daughter of the radiant throne, looked at the human beside her, and something in her lightless amber eyes lit after all, and she did a thing that no Valan chronicle had ever recorded a princess doing in the great arena. In front of the 10,000 and the humming and the unspent ring of fire, she laughed. They did not leave the arena at once. There is a strange courtesy in great rooms after great events, a reluctance of the assembled to be the first to move, as though motion might undo what had just been made true. So the 10,000 held their tears a while longer, and the low sustained note faded slowly rather than stopping, and Princess Ithran kept her hand on the human's shoulder to steady her, and for a length of time neither of them found necessary to measure, Nothing more was done. It was Wren who broke it, because a technician's mind cannot leave an open question alone, and there was one that had been turning in her since the slate woke. The other three, she said, her voice was low only for the princess. The flag officers on the bridge, the ones who died when I vented the core. She swallowed against the smoke rasp. Did they know? Were they his? Because if they were, then I killed 3 of your murderers along with 940 of your innocents. And if they weren't, then I killed 3 people who might have stopped him if I'd found a way to reach them instead of doing what I did. I've been turning it over for 11 days and I can't put it down, and now the slate's open and you'll be able to read it, and I think I need to know which it was. Whatever it is. I've earned the whole of it, I think, and I'd rather carry the true weight than the guessed one. Princess Ithron looked at her for a moment, and there was something in the amber eyes that had not been there on the balcony. A recognition, perhaps, that this was a person who would always want the true weight over the kind one, and that such people are rare in any species and rarer still among the ones who have been given every reason to prefer the lie. I will read it, Ithron said. Every command, every timestamp, every name. And when I know, I will tell you, and I will tell you plainly, even the parts that are hard. You have my word on the radiant throne. She paused. But I can tell you one thing now before the reading, because I watched it in the light above the glass and I have some skill with the drive court records. The 3 who died on the bridge did not enter a single tuning command. Not one. The seals on all 6 days of them are his alone. Whatever they were, loyal or blind or merely asleep at their posts, they were not his hands on the array. You did not kill 3 fellow murderers, Wren Callahan. And you could not have reached them in time to make allies of them, because by the time you found the fault you had 40 minutes and they were 12 decks and a chain of command away. You have turned this over for 11 days. Let me give you back at least this much of the sleep he took from you. There was no version of that hour in which you saved them. There was only the version in which you saved the station and the truth, and that is the version you chose, and it is the one that happened. Wren was quiet for a moment. It did not lift the weight. She had told the princess it would not, and it did not, but it changed its shape from the guessed thing to the true thing, and the true thing, however heavy, could at least be set down and picked up in a known place. Thank you, she said, and meant it in the plain, flat way she meant most things, and the princess understood that from this human it was not a small phrase. Around them, the tears had at last begun to empty, the nobles filing out through the folded wing archways in the slow, murmuring current of people who have witnessed something they will spend years describing badly to those who were not there. And as they passed the arena floor, a thing happened that no herald had ordered and no rite required. One by one, and then in greater numbers, the departing Valen paused at the edge of the black glass, and turned toward its center where the human stood held upright by the princess, and made a gesture, a slow folding of the long hands over the crest, the gesture their kind offered at the tomb of the honored dead and the throne of the living sovereign, the gesture of a debt acknowledged. 10,000 of them, or near enough over the long span of the emptying, folded their hands to a human drive technician, 3rd class, whom an hour before they had come to watch die. Wren did not know the gesture's name. The princess told her. Wren looked at the passing river of gray figures folding their hands to her, and her scarred face did the complicated thing again, and she said, very low, I don't deserve that, not for this, not with what my hands did. They are not thanking your hands for what they did, Ithron said. They are thanking you for what you refused to let their deaths be turned into. There is a difference, and my people are old enough to know it even when you are too tired to. Let them fold their hands. It costs you nothing, and it gives them back something my uncle stole from all of us, the ability to grieve the truth instead of a lie. That is not a small gift, Wren. It may be the largest one anybody in this arena will ever be given. Let them thank you for it. So she let them. She stood on the black glass, held up, and let 10,000 aliens fold their hands to her. And somewhere in the middle of that long river she stopped fighting it. not because she came to believe she deserved it, but because she came to understand that it was not really about deserving, that the folding hands were the empire teaching itself, in the only language it had, that it had been wrong about what a human was, and that to refuse the lesson out of her own guilt would be to make her guilt more important than their learning, and she was not willing to do that. It was the last calculation of the day, and she made it the way she had made all the others, by weighing what her refusal would cost against what her acceptance would buy, and choosing the truth over the comfort. When at last the arena was nearly empty, Ithron summoned the physicians, but she did not surrender the human to them at once. She walked with Wren to the foot of the balcony stair slowly, matching the human's unsteady pace, and there she stopped and looked back across the black glass at the place where the ring of chains still lay open on its floor, and the unspent ring of fire still hung in the air with its 9 seconds. "I made this arena," the princess said, "to make small things feel their smallness. My grandmother built the black glass and I kept it polished, and I told myself it served justice because it made the guilty understand their guilt. I believed that this morning." She was quiet a moment. "I will not tear it down. That would be a lie of a different kind, pretending I never believed in it. But I will never again use it to make a small thing feel small, because today the smallest thing in the room reached up 40 feet in chains and turned out to be the largest, and I would have killed her for the crime of being underestimated by the very floor I built. That is a thing I need to keep where I can see it. So the glass stays, and the open chain stays, and the 9 seconds stay, and every judgment I ever make for the rest of my reign will be made by someone who remembers that she was one word away from executing the person who saved her, and that the word she almost said was certain." She turned to the human. "You gave me that. I did not want it, and I cannot repay it, and I will carry it as long as you carry your 940. We are, I think, going to be carrying things for each other for a long time." "That's not a debt," Wren said. "That's just what witnesses do." And the princess, who had not known the human word before that afternoon, turned it over and found that it fit and kept it. Then the physicians came and took her, and the princess let her go, and the great arena of the Veil and Ascendancy stood empty at last, with the black glass drinking the light of 10,000 lamps, and the ring of fire counting slowly down toward the 9 seconds it would never spend. And the whole long turning of history that had begun on that floor went out from it into the reach like a wake signature that no one would ever be able to edit or forge or silence. Logged forever by a system that had been watching when it thought no one was. The account between a princess and a condemned human closed that day on the black glass, but the account between the Veil and Ascendancy and its own reckoning had only opened, and it did not close quickly. These things never do. Empires that have believed a comfortable lie for 11 days do not surrender it in an afternoon, no matter what light was shown to them in an arena. Kaloth Selvalan was tried. Not in the arena the princess ruled would hold no more judgments for a long while. It needed, she said, to forget for a generation what it had almost been used for. He was tried in the closed chamber of the Radiant Throne, before the assembled flag officers and the surviving blood of the house, and the trial lasted 11 days, which no one failed to notice was the exact span the human had spent in her cell. The wake signature was entered into evidence. The tuning commands with their coded seals were entered. The black slate, uneditable, sealed by the house's own hand, was read shell by shell and command by command, until there was nothing left of 3 centuries of loyal service, but the record of the 6 days in which it had become the most complete betrayal in the history of the Reach. Kaloth offered no defense, because there was none, and because, the observers agreed, he did not believe he had done wrong. To the end he held that he had made a hard choice a soft house could not make, that the murder of 940 and his own niece Sarach had been an act of governance, that history would vindicate the man who tried to harden the Reach against the coming of the cluster fleets. When they asked him if he repented, he said only that he regretted a technician. When the sentence came, he heard it with the slow considering close of his amber eyes, and he was taken to the cold moons beyond threshold, to a stripped cell on a rock that turned its face from the sun. And there, stripped of rank and name and crest honor, he was left to live out the very long remainder of a Vaelan life with nothing to govern but the walls. The princess did not have him killed. Some said it was mercy. Ithran said it was not. She said that a man who believed the future would thank him should be made to live in it long enough to watch it refuse. Wren Callahan did not attend the trial. She was, for the first 4 of those 11 days, in the care of the house physicians, who found in her body the full accounting of what 11 days and 11 hours had cost it. The burns, the swelling that had nearly taken 2 of her fingers, the deep grinding damage in her knees, the smoke that had scarred the inside of her voice so that she would speak, for the rest of her life, in the low cracked register the arena had heard. The Vaelan physicians, who had never treated a human and regarded the assignment with the wary fascination of scholars handed a live and famous specimen, mended what could be mended and told her honestly what could not. She took the news the way she took most things, with a technician's nod as data. The voice she did not mind. It was worth a voice, she said, and would say no more. But the thing that the ascendancy could not mend, and the thing that the physicians could not chart, was the weight she had told the princess about on the glass, the 940. That did not lift. It was not supposed to lift, and Wren would not have trusted any easing of it. She had killed them with her own hands on the lattice, and the truth that the killing had been the only mercy left, that every one of them would have died anyway and worse, did not change the fact of her hands. She carried it. She had said she would carry it for however long they left her alive, and they had, against every expectation including her own, left her alive, and so she carried it a long way. What the ascendancy did do, what Princess Ithran did, in the first act of the reign that this day had made her, for the old king her father had abdicated the outer wardenship into her hands within the year, and the radiant throne itself not many years after, was to make certain that the 940 were remembered rightly, not as the victims of a human saboteur, as the murdered of Kaloth Sel Vaelan, and beside their names in the memorial raised over Kalix Station was set a single human name, not as their killer, but as the one who had ensured that their murderer did not go unnamed into history. Wren asked that her name be taken off it. The princess refused. It was, the historians noted, the only command Ithran ever gave the human that the human tried to disobey, and the only one the princess enforced against her will. The larger turn, the title of the tale would remember, the turn that made the historians speak of that day in the arena as a hinge on which an age had swung, was not the fall of one traitor or the honoring of one human. Traitors fall in every reign, and honors are cheap. The turn was in what the ascendancy decided a human was. They had admitted humans to the trade lanes out of pity. Ithran had said in her opening declaration, clever creatures with no claws, taken in because they came starving, trusted the way one trusts a useful tool that cannot bite. A tool. That had been the whole of the Vaelan understanding of the species. Quick hands, cheap labor, a cleverness that was convenient precisely because it was assumed to be small. It was the same understanding, exactly, that had let Kaloth build his perfect crime, because who watches the drive logs, who counts a third-class technician, who imagines that the tool assigned to calibrate the lattice might be the one variable that reaches up 40 feet in chains and undoes 3 centuries. He had been destroyed by the ascendancy's own contempt for humans, and the ascendancy, being made of proud and intelligent creatures, could not fail to see it. So the understanding changed. It changed slowly in the way of empires, but it changed, and the day in the arena was where it began. A species that could produce Wren Callahan, that could, in 40 minutes and alone, weigh 940 deaths against a whole station and choose, and act, and then spend 11 days building a justice it did not expect to live to see. Such a species was not a tool. The debates in the closed chambers of the throne over what humans were, and what they might be owed, and where they might stand went on for a generation. And Wren, who lived to be old by the measure of her own kind, saw the beginning of them and did not see the end. But she saw the human freeholds move from labor accords to standing, from tools admitted out of pity to a people the radiant throne dealt with as a people. And she knew, as few people ever get to know, exactly which afternoon and which black glass floor the change had turned on. She and the princess did not become, in the easy way of stories, fast and lifelong friends. They were too unlike, and the thing that bound them was too heavy to make a light companionship of. But they became something the Valen had no ready word for, and the humans had only an old and serious one. They became each other's witnesses. Ithron had witnessed the human reach up 40 feet in chains and hand her the life she was an instant from losing. Wren had witnessed the princess, alone on the black glass, kneel down to the level of a condemned thing's eyes and choose, against grief and certainty and the whole weight of a comfortable lie, to look. Each had seen the other at the one moment that decided who they truly were, and that is a bond that does not need friendship to be permanent. For the rest of Ithron's very long life, whenever the radiant throne faced a choice between the comfortable certainty and the hard true thing, she kept in her private chamber a small black slate, uneditable, sealed by her own house's hand, and she looked at it, and she made the other choice. And in the great arena of the Valen ascendancy, 3 years after that day, they raised a statue where the black glass used to be, a human figure, kneeling, but with the head lifted, looking up. And into the base of it they carved the words the human had spoken about doing the last thing left that she could still do right. They never did finish the ring of fire. Wren had asked that it be left to gutter out on its own, and it had, sometime in the small hours after the arena emptied, burning down from 9 seconds to 0 over the course of a night with no one watching and no one dying and nothing at all at stake, until it reached the bottom of its count and simply went dark, a monument to the smallest possible thing. A minute that had meant everything and then, given back, meant nothing at all. But the scorch mark it left on the airglyph housing stayed, faint and permanent, 9 seconds short of the bottom of the ring, and the record keepers did have to explain it, exactly as she had said, and the explanation they wrote became one of the most copied passages in the annals of the Reach. It read, "On this day the warden of the Outer Reach declared that a human had 1 minute left to live, and lit the ring and began to count. And in that minute the human did not beg for her life. She spent it giving the ascendancy back its truth, and the truth was so much larger than the minute that, when the minute ended, history had already turned onto a different road, and the ring was left with 9 seconds unspent because there was no longer anything in the whole of the Reach that those 9 seconds could be used to take. Let it stand unfinished. Some counts are meant to be interrupted. This one was interrupted by the discovery of what a human is worth, and no clock in the ascendancy has been trusted to measure that since. Wren Callahan lived a long time. She went back, eventually, to the drive sections and the containment lattices, because it was the work she was good at, and the work she trusted, and because, she said, in the low cracked voice the arena had given her somebody who had watched a star tuned to sing itself into a murder ought to spend her life making certain no other star was ever tuned that way again. She trained a generation of technicians, human and Valen both, and the first thing she taught every one of them was to watch the drive logs, always, because the drive logs are the one witness no flag officer thinks to silence. And the last thing she taught them was the thing she had learned on the black glass. That the rules are written for the days when the fault is an accident, and that there will come, in a long enough life, one day when the fault is not an accident and the clock is running, and there is no one to report it to and no time to be reported. And on that day, a person finds out what they are. She had found out what she was on a ship called the Unbroken Meridian, 12 decks from a princess's sister, with 40 minutes and no help and everything to lose. She had been 22 years old. She had lifted her head off the black glass with 1 minute left to live, and looked up at the tall gray figure who had condemned her and pitied her, because the princess was walking toward a cliff she could not see, and she had spent her final minute turning the princess back from the edge. And in doing it, without ever rising from her knees, she had turned an empire back from the same edge, and set the whole long history of two peoples onto a road it would not otherwise have found. The alien princess had declared the humans' final minute. She had lit the ring and begun the count and been so very certain. And then the small burned thing on the black glass had opened her ruined human voice, and history had taken a different turn. And at the end of it, it was not the human who knelt in awe before the throne, but the throne that knelt, on its own black glass, in front of 10,000 witnesses, to look a human in the eye and call her by the name her kind reserved for the great. Not tool, not creature, not the smallest thing in the arena, but the largest, the one who, given a single minute and every reason to spend it on herself, had spent it instead on the truth, and by that single choice had bought back not 9 seconds but an age.